You're listening to the Fit Bottom Girls podcast, the only podcast for active, athletic, and adventurous women and those who aspire to be. We've got your back as you navigate the ups and the downs of motherhood, midlife, and menopause. I'm your host, Allison Hylett, here to remind you that female isn't fragile. I'm a strength, conditioning, and nutrition coach who's trained hundreds of women to achieve their goals to get fit, lift heavy, go the distance, and feel like a badass in every area of their lives. Each week, you'll hear from me and some of our awesome guests as we educate and empower you during each stage of your fitness journey, whether you're already crushing it, fighting to get back out there, or starting from day one. So friends, let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fit Bottom Girls podcast. I am so excited for today's episode because over the years, I've worked with tons of women who've been intimidated by lifting weights. So they've chosen to stick with things like yoga, Pilates, spin, and other group classes at their local gym. But after a while, many of these women felt that something was missing. They weren't feeling as fit or as strong as they'd hoped for all the effort they were putting into exercise. And as it turns out, they just weren't doing the right kinds of exercise to meet their goals. What they needed to do was change their approach. And that's exactly what today's guest, Trisha Durham, did. Trisha is a yoga teacher and a personal trainer with over 2 decades of experience. She's transitioned from a traditional yoga teacher to a more multifaceted movement trainer, a journey that began when she was faced with burnout and physical pain. She realized that relying solely on yoga for all of her movement needs was just not enough, and that the rigid emphasis on flexibility and alignment didn't align with the inclusive and sustainable practice that she envisioned for herself or her students. Trisha started lifting a barbell for the first time in her 40s, and that shift brought about the end of her debilitating back pain that persisted in spite of her decades of practicing yoga. So let's dive into our conversation. Welcome, Trisha. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You and I have been fangirling each other on Instagram for a few years now, but what I love about you and your content is that you have transitioned from this traditional yoga teacher role to more of this multifaceted movement trainer who's really teaching people to throw those strict, rigid alignment rules out the window and to move in a variety of ways for more resilience. Recently, in one of your posts, you said, "I'm more interested in helping you move than helping you pose." I love that.
Oh, yeah. That about sums it up. Yeah, It really has been a major shift. And when you step back and look at where your priorities are, that's really what it comes down to, helping people to move. And that's what I found that they were coming to me for, was to be able to move well in life.
Yeah. Yeah. Who cares how great your warrior 2 is if you can't climb the stairs without pain? It's approaching it from that functional perspective. And as a durability coach, or as a coach for athletes, I love yoga. I love everything that it does for people. It's got so many benefits, but talking about how balance is really necessary.
We hear that yoga is so healing. And a lot of folks say, my doctor told me to do yoga, to start yoga. And so that's where it really started to be a conflict for me, because the flexibility, we have built flexibility up to be this kind of cure-all, right? That's the problem. I'm not flexible enough. And flexibility is like this Band-Aid. We tell people, oh, maybe just stretch. If it's tight or does it hurt, just stretch it. And I kind of joke sometimes, oh, if we could just say, oh, just strengthen it. Not that this one is better, but could we at least even include or talk about strength the way that we've talked about flexibility all these years? Because then people will get into yoga and then they will at some point realize that yoga isn't the fix to all their problems.
Yeah. And I see that too. People come to me and they have aches and pains. They're like, oh, I'm just really stiff. Or can you tell me what to do to stretch this? And it's like, hold on a second. We don't know that it needs to be stretched. Right. And in fairness, I have worked with a lot of people who have spent decades of their life stretching things, and it's not improved the situation.
Yeah. Been there, done that. As a runner, I just thought all of my aches and pains that came with running, overuse injuries, that I just hadn't found the right stretch. Boy, I sure did try.
Yeah. So we are going to talk today about the importance of movement variety, particularly for women as they age. So first, let's just start with a little bit about your personal story for context. So you were, as I said, a traditional yoga teacher who was relying solely on yoga for all of your movement needs, which is a really common phenomenon. Even if it's not yoga, people will pick the one thing and that's enough for them. So what led you to that point? And then what changed?
I originally got into yoga for stress management. And at the time, this was the early 2000s, the only show in town was ashtanga. There was not the more mainstream flow, vinyasa studios. There was no hot yoga yet. So I walked into my local yoga studio, not knowing I'm signing up for an ashtanga class, just that's what they taught. And so my background is dance. I'm a classically trained dancer. I spent the first half of my life as a professional dancer. So actually, ashtanga lined up well because I was good at it. I was good at alignment. You want me to make a line? I can give you a line. There's no problem there. And within that culture of ashtanga at the time, you earned their praise for being good and the alignment looking good and symmetrical, the symmetry. So I took to it because, again, the validation of doing something good, doing it well. And I practiced ashtanga for about 10 years before I ever became a yoga teacher. That came later. And then I became a yoga teacher, and it was actually with a studio, again, not really intentional, but the studio was Ashtanga based. So my yoga teacher training was Ashtanga based. And so I taught Ashtanga for a couple of years. And then it was right then that then the shift started because something had to change with me physically and my body starting to hurt. And then just with the teaching and the style.
For those of the listeners that are listening and they're thinking, what is Ashtanga? Ashtanga is really about precision. So to this idea that good alignment will keep you safe. And that's a fear that I hear from a lot of people, not just in yoga, but also in lifting and in other things. We're so worried that by doing the thing, we're going to hurt ourselves. And so we rely on like good form and precision, thinking that those things are going to create safety. What I hear you saying is that that wasn't working. You were having aches and pains, and you realized that even with all of that precision alignment, this was still not yet free.
Yeah, I was getting more and more injuries the longer I practiced the primary series, and I had increased the number of times, the frequency of my practice. And I just found that something was missing. And, again, I went searching for stretches and things. It didn't occur to me to look outside of yoga at that time because it was such a large part of my life and identity. And I bought into the idea that was always suggested in front of mine, which was practice and all is coming, that this is all you need. And I believed that. I was told those things were encouraged in practice. And so I didn't think that even looking outside of yoga would do anything or have anything. And then as I slowly expanded my understanding of movement and different things I was doing in life, I caught wind that maybe there's something else. And so I went on that journey.
Yeah. So tell me about that.
To be clear, as much as I love lifting heavy weights now, like I am not the type of person that has always been lifting or the stereotypical gym rat, but I love it now. And I got into it because I had low back pain. I had awful back pain that I had tried everything I could possibly try. I went through all the yoga stuff, and then within yoga, the foam rolling, the massage, any alternative therapy that was thrown at me, I'd try it. Some things would work short term, as they do.
Yeah.
But nothing really actually like solved or remedied the back pain long term. I think at such a crossroads of like, I'm going to have to figure this out because no one else can, doctors included. And I don't remember exactly how I came across strength or even learned that strength could be the thing. It was just, I'm a very curious person. I like to learn. So I know I was reading a lot and obviously still teaching. So I came across it somewhere at some point and I was like, well, let's try strength. I'm hearing about strengthening your back. I'm learning that the core is not just your abs. All these things were starting to come together for me. And that's when I was like, all right, so we're going to try strength. And I had come across weights in like a group fitness setting, but never touched a barbell. And I actually had first signed up for a small group training thing, which I think is a great way for folks to take that next step into strength. So I got into that and it was kettlebell based, but there was barbells there. And there was a trainer there that helped me literally with just a empty bar. And he showed me the back squat and he showed me the deadlift, literally like step by step. And from there on, I never looked back. My mind was blown just with the barbell work, just the whole idea of learning how to breathe and brace with the barbell, which was so different than anything I'd experienced with yoga and breathing. And I've not had back pain since. This isn't a message for like back pain, but like it literally got rid of my back pain. It worked for me. I'm not saying it works for everybody, but
Yeah.
I don't have back pain.
People are really intimidated by the barbell. And I work with a lot of women who've never touched a barbell in their life. They do not feel they belong in the free weight section of the gym in general. There was a long time where you'd go into the gym and I would be the only woman in the free weight section. It's like that whole section of the gym is really intimidating for a lot of women. And it's even more intimidating, I think, if you walk in there and it's all dudes with dumbbells and barbells staring at themselves in the mirror. It does look really intimidating. But there's a couple of key movements that you can learn with the barbell. You can learn them first with dumbbell and kettlebell, if that makes sense, and then learn it with the
Mhm.
barbell. And then you don't have to do all of the weird stuff that you see on Instagram. You can stick to these basic movements and you can do them for the rest of your life and continue to get benefit from them because of progressive overload and putting a little bit more weight on. I know even when I get women on board for dumbbells and kettlebells, barbells are just very intimidating to people.
Yeah, it is another level. I think it's a piece of equipment that women are just not exposed to unless maybe you're in collegiate sports or something
Mhm.
like that. Again, I never lifted weights like that with a barbell. I picked up a barbell the first time in 2017, and I think I was 44 then. So I didn't touch a barbell until I was in my 40s. When I first did that, I really enjoy the back squat. I took to it. There's quite a bit of mobility, flexibility. And when you think about the back squat and getting low into that, a lot of things have to be movable with
Yes.
that. So I find that movement or that shape of the deep squat very interesting. And a lot of people struggle with that position, even just body weight, like in a deep squat.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think it's interesting too, because we have this belief around weightlifters or people who lift heavy weights or use the barbell as being really like stiff and bulky. And that's not the case. If you look at the Olympics, for example, the second most mobile group of people at the Olympics are the Olympic weightlifters. They're only behind gymnasts. If you're going to the gym and you're doing strength training, that's going to require a good amount of mobility, which you will work on and which will get better as you go, especially if you're working on strengthening through the range of motion as opposed to just passively falling into the range of motion. It's interesting because we don't think about strength training as being a mechanism for improving mobility, but it actually really can be.
Yes, absolutely. My mobility improved all on its own with that back squat movement, my
Mm.
ankle mobility specifically, my hips, like where my pelvis was. Like there was quite a bit of learning and understanding that came with the gains of strength training with the barbell,
Mhm.
an understanding that I hadn't yet tapped into until I stepped off the yoga mat.
Yeah, I've never, in my 10 years of working with people as a durability coach, I've never found a single person where the true cause of their pain was lack of flexibility. Lack of joint mobility, sure. Lack of strength, sure. But like flexibility of the tissues, no. I'm sure it happens. I'm sure it exists. I'm just saying it's very unlikely that is the sole problem. So when people I work with are talking about injuries, they're having repetitive injuries, they're having this chronic low back pain of unknown, origin that has baffled and confused everyone and they can't find any way around it. And we talk about strength training as being the next thing to try. There's a little hesitation in that of like, I need to stretch it. I don't need to make it stiffer. And that's not what strength training does. I get where it comes from. Bodybuilders are what people think about when they think of strength training, and they intentionally train in short ranges of motion to promote more muscle gain. So they don't move through a full range of motion on purpose in order to grow more muscle because their goal is aesthetics.
And in all of this imaging that we're discussing, it's a male image. It's generally a man. And or even women that have quite a bit of muscle mass. If we could just highlight how much work that actually takes to get that aesthetic, if only it were that easy.
Oh, yes. I wish I could accidentally get jacked.
Accidentally get fat. Yeah. Now I went into it clearly, obviously, with not the physical gains in mind. It was the
Mhm.
pain. It was these other things, bone density and such. But now that I'm into it, I'm like, oh, I don't mind if my bicep grows
Mhm.
now. Could it please grow?
I know. I spend a lot of time in the gym. I like to look like I lift, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that doesn't need to be your goal. You don't
Mhm.
have to go from 0 to 100 to get the benefit of it.
Oh, absolutely. It makes being able to move on the mat so much
Mm.
easier and it's just not a struggle.
Yeah.
And it's just more enjoyable because yoga asana, our flow type classes, they're a body weight practice. Our body is a heavy weight. So if we're down on the ground and we're navigating the floor and moving around, the strength is just going to complement that. And it just makes everything easier and nicer. And I actually appreciate the yoga that much more.
Yeah, and for me, it takes the pressure off of the yoga practice. You don't have to get your bone building, your muscle building, your cardio. You don't have to get everything from a yoga class. You can just go and enjoy the mobility of it and the centering and grounding nature of it without having to hurry up and do 10 extra chaturangas to get your heart rate up. You can just enjoy what you're doing and be a little bit more present with it and not have to force it to be something that maybe it's just not going to be for you.
Yes. Oh my gosh. The pressure is off so much when it's like you're trying to make yoga everything. And that adds a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure
Yeah.
on you then when you're doing it because you got to get it all in. And then if you come into a studio, if it's not hard enough for you or all of these things, it doesn't have to let you down in that way.
Yeah, and that's what I was just thinking. I've worked with a lot of yoga teachers who are injured and who've been practicing yoga for most of their lives. And they reach this point where it's not enough, which is what you were describing. It's not enough. It's starting to show up. And they feel betrayed by the practice that it was supposed to be this cure all thing. It was supposed to be all that you needed in their mind. And then when it isn't that, they start to be upset with yoga that they got hurt in yoga. And it's like the yoga is not why you got hurt. The yoga is not why your back hurts. It's the imbalance of it. It's no different with runners who only run. I see this all the time in that population too. It's like you just do one type of movement and that's all you do. And there's not enough balance. So by thinking about it in that terms, incorporating more movement variety, we are creating more potential for our bodies to feel better.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I run. I enjoy running. And so with the Olympics this past summer, just paying a little more attention to those elite runners and hearing how the female elite runners are talking about how strength training is encouraged now, where it used to be this very lean, very thin look so they could be fast.
Yeah.
And it's happening in the ballet world too, because they still keep an ear to that world as well. And my gosh, in the late 80s, you would have never thought about lifting a weight. And now you've got ballerinas in a gym with physical therapists and they're loading. And it's extending the careers
Yeah.
of these ballet dancers.
Yeah.
It's not that you're done at 30.
There is more longevity in that.
Longevity with not just dancers, the runners. So yeah, you don't just only do your sport.
Totally. Yeah, the variety of movement really can prolong the longevity of you doing the things that you like to do. And sometimes just stepping out to include more variety can prolong your ability to do the things that you enjoy.
Yes, absolutely. And I didn't necessarily go into strength training, lifting heavy weights, like, oh, I'm going to enjoy this.
Yeah.
But I was so desperate. But then once I started doing it, I still enjoy it. Sometimes we don't know we're going to enjoy a thing. And so we need it or at least try it. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoy it.
This is something you've never done before. This is completely foreign to you. And you're probably not going to be super good at it at first. That can be really intimidating and make people feel like they're not going to enjoy it. But the reality is, with strength training, most people, especially in the beginning, you get newbie gains real fast and you get that validation. And you're like, holy shit, I can lift weight.
Yes, absolutely. The early gains. Oh my gosh. Thank goodness for those.
Yeah.
It does hook you. I can totally relate to that. But speaking for myself, I wasn't like, I can't wait to lift weights because my previous limited exposure to lifting weights was in a group class setting or maybe just a little bit on my own with hand weight. And they were not heavy. These were loads that were actually, it was underloaded. So it was boring. I didn't really feel like I was doing anything. It seemed like it took too long. And within a group class setting, it's limited in what we can do. Everybody's synchronized. This heavy lifting where you have to focus and you are doing something. That's the distinction there.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a different experience than doing 100 reps of biceps curls in a group training class versus walking up to a barbell, approaching the barbell, getting under the barbell, bracing. All of the steps that are involved is really like meditative in some ways because you have to be very focused on what you're doing. And there just isn't any room for the noise in your head. So I think it like chases out a lot of the rumination and anxiety because you're only going to do 3 to 6 reps with a heavy weight. And so you need to be really focused for that time period. And then you get these rest breaks, which you should take.
Yeah.
You should take the rest breaks. Don't do jumping jacks. Take the rest.
That I think too is another major hurdle. I work one-on-one with clients that I strength train, and getting them to understand how the rest period is an integral part of the workout, and that we're not going to run over here now and do this other move and then come back and expect that we're going to squat our 95 pounds again.
Yeah, it's not a workout that you leave totally trashed from. Good strength training programming, you are recovering in that rest period. You're ready to go for the next rep. And then you leave the gym feeling strong and empowered, not like, now I need to go lay on the couch for the rest of the day. So the strength training that we're talking about, that women over 40 really, really, really benefit from, is lower reps, heavier weights for them, doing it a couple times, and then sitting down and just chilling for 2 minutes before you go do it again. And you'll leave the gym and you'll be like, oh my God, I feel amazing.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's such a shift to get to that.
Yeah. Because even though it seems like the workout will be more intense because there's more weights, you have those moments of intensity. Like the last 2 reps of every set should be pretty challenging for you, but it's not like high intensity across the board. Hey, you. I wanted to press pause on this episode for a second to talk about your fitness goals. You know, those sweet dreams of being more active and feeling athletic and confident and doing epic, adventurous shit. Or maybe you just feel like you're getting older, because we're all getting older. And you, like me, never want to give up on carrying all the groceries into the house in one shot, or picking up that heavy Amazon box without worrying that you're going to throw your back out. I know you're busy. You're probably listening to this episode while multitasking. Oh yeah, I'm on to you. And the biggest thing that's stopping you from getting strong and fit is knowing how to use your workout time most effectively. Like exactly which exercises are worth your time, when to do them, and the number of sets and reps to get to your goals. You probably also tried other fitness apps and programs out there, only to feel like they weren't right for your needs. You want a program that has it all: strength, power, cardio, mobility, and recovery, all built right in without spending your whole life in the gym. And you want experienced coaches around to answer your questions, and a community at your back to help you stay motivated and inspired. Look, I've been coaching women for a long time now, and the truth is that you don't need another fad diet or complicated, time-consuming workout routine to support you as you age. You just need to train smarter with simple, progressive workouts and a plan that's designed for your body and your life, whether you're navigating motherhood, midlife, or menopause. And if this sounds like exactly what you've been missing, I invite you to join Stronger 365, a progressive strength, power, and conditioning training membership for women like you who are ready to stop winging it and take their training to the next level with more structure and support. And the best part? This program has 3 different options, so you can choose your own fitness adventure based on your goals, how much time you have to train, and what equipment you have, whether you've got access to a full gym or, like me, work out at home. And it's run by me, Allison Heilig, and my awesome team at Miles to Go Athletics. Head over to the show notes for all the details and to join our membership community. And as an FBG, your first 2 weeks are on me. And now, let's get back to the episode. So just a really good reminder here that it's okay to change your approach. It's okay to release some of the dogma and try some different things, especially like in your situation where you were having back pain. It was not getting better by doing more yoga or doing yoga better. So something had to change, right? There's something along the way. You had to be open to other approaches. And that's what I really love about you and the content you put out there. You're really moving in and out of poses and being more playful and curious about movement.
Well, me just being a lifelong mover, I think the whole idea of holding poses and holding static stretches, just, the allure of that wore off pretty quick. I'm a mover. But also what I would find people really struggle with is the transition. People would be fine when they get in a pose, and people that had really good alignment, like they'd look great in that snapshot of the pose, but moving, the in-between stuff that we don't talk about, or even the stuff that we don't really even have cues or words for, is where I saw people struggle. And that's those little snippets, that's their mobility. And it was a lot of times just trash.
So in our daily lives, we're not moving from pose to pose. We're just moving.
Mhm.
So what people do when they're not being held captive by those alignment rules is the gray area that they live in. And so tapping into those transitions and the way people are moving from one pose to another, from one thing in their life to another is really how we create more resilience.
Yes. I think people believe that they will move better if they're flexible. And like flexibility doesn't require movement. So like I literally there was people it's like if I'm just more flexible, I will be able to move better. No, if you want to move better, you need to move more. You need to move. And there's a real gap there, a real chasm between the holding the stretches and then getting able to be able to move better.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
I just started to fill in those gaps. And yoga on the mat, being a body weight practice, it lends itself well to being able to incorporate actual mobility. I could sneak in some mobility things and people took to it. And then I just looked for ways that I could incorporate the more pedestrian mobility into their yoga flow experience.
Yeah.
And I didn't need to make every yoga pose like a mobility thing. Like I would do some very identifiable yoga thing, and then I might do a separate on
Mm.
its own standalone kind of mobility thing. Because people needed to develop that before they could try to link it all together.
Yeah, it's interesting because the most requested classes that I've ever had as a yoga teacher were teaching people to get up from the floor without using their hands. That's not a yoga pose. Doesn't
No.
even involve a series of yoga poses, but it involves really key movements. These people that had been practicing yoga for years didn't
Mhm.
have the active mobility to get themselves up from the floor to standing without using their hands. And so every time I taught those classes, they were such a big hit. Everybody was like, "This is so much fun." And I'm like, "This is mobility. This is not
Yeah.
flexibility. This is
Yeah.
mobility."
Yeah. And it's just right there waiting for them because we get up and down from the floor in yoga like the entire hour.
Mm,
We're doing it through dog, down dog, or we're
mm.
using our hands, or there's momentum.
Yeah. So this is growth, though,
Yeah.
recognizing it doesn't need to be a situation where the old way of doing it was wrong and I was wrong for following it, but do it as best as you can. And then when you have new information, when there's more information and more experience available to you, you will make different decisions or you will expand beyond that approach. And that doesn't mean that the old way was wrong or that you were wrong. It
Mhm.
just means that there's more there to consider.
Yes, absolutely. I wasn't exposed to these bigger concepts of movement and human movement. And then once I was able to incorporate them and expand other people's knowledge about them. And
Yeah.
so it can be helpful for yoga teachers to again step outside of the yoga world and get their information out there because within the yoga bubble we have a certain framework and we have alignment rules waiting for us and to find something that is different than that we just got to maybe step out or if in your own endeavors your strength training you're going to come right up against those new concepts and you can incorporate them and if anything it'll just give you a better understanding for our ability to move
Yeah.
in a variety of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to spend a couple minutes here at the end of this interview just talking about some of the toxic myths around women's fitness. All I saw was women who were of a certain age were doing only gentle, only low impact, low intensity. There's a point in your life where you're ushered off the sidelines and over here to the gentle, low impact classes. And that's one that I struggle with a lot because it's not doing women any service in terms of bone density. It's not doing women any service in terms of their blood glucose regulation because muscle is a really important way that we help regulate our blood sugar. What are you out there smashing these days?
Well, I think a big one is that women of a certain age, women over 40, that lifting weights, heavy weights is dangerous, that we can't really, that there must be an age limit. We can't build muscle if we're old or older. So that's a common one that I hear. Or again, if folks are dealing with pain or an injury of some sort. Doesn't even have to be really serious. But this idea of strength training is counter to an injury or pain, when in fact, it can actually be very beneficial. It can help you with pain
Mm.
and it can help us recover from injury.
Yeah, there's definitely some movements out there that are not going to work for them, right? I'll post something about bone density and plyo or hopping or things like that. And people are like, "Shoot, my knees would never tolerate that." It's like, you don't start with that. That's not what you start with if you have knee pain. But there is a progression that
Mhm.
over time, hopefully, your knees would actually be able to tolerate a little bit of impact. But you have to approach it from a wise way. You don't go into the gym and try to pick up a 300-pound barbell if you've never lifted before. You have to build up the capacity of the tissues in order to be able to do those things, because with functionality in the body, it is a use it or lose it situation. If you're not training your body by doing certain activities on a regular basis, you are training them not to be able to tolerate those movements, that impact, that stimulus, whatever it is. So this idea that I'm afraid I'm going to get hurt, so I'm not going to do the thing that can help me not get hurt, is really one that just gets me.
Yeah, I see that a lot. And I think the other one that is a common one that I'm oftentimes just talking to people about, primarily women, is what's heavy for you. And we talk about lifting heavy. It's not just heavy what we see other people lifting, it's heavy for you.
Mhm.
But also in reverse is we notoriously underload our body. And
Mhm.
when I think because our hand weights have a number written on them, whereas like our groceries and our dogs don't have the number written on them. We are already contending with various loads in our life.
Yes.
But when it's like a proper weight implement, then it's the big scary kind of thing. And so across the board, we can lift more than we realize.
And when we're doing it in our daily life, we are not concerned about form. Right? Like,
No.
my dog is injured. He's a 50-pound cattle dog. I just bend down and pick him up. I'm not sitting there going, okay, the way that I would approach a barbell, of, I'm going to pick up this weight, right? Feet in
Yeah.
this position. No, I pick the dog up. And
Mm.
so this idea that we can't lift heavy and we must have perfect form every time we do it is not true. If you're having pain during a movement, we need to deal with the pain. That doesn't make the movement bad. Also does not mean that you should be avoiding that movement. I hear about all the time on deadlifts. Deadlifts. I hurt my back during deadlifts. I'll never deadlift again. Well, you are going to have a wild play because you're picking up Amazon boxes off your front porch, aren't you? You're picking up your grandkids, aren't you? Deadlift is a movement that happens in life. And if we aren't training it wisely and progressively in the gym to do it well, we're going to injure ourselves in life. That doesn't mean that doing it in the gym is going to be dangerous for us. We might actually learn to tolerate those movements better in the gym so that we're not getting hurt outside. We're more likely to get hurt outside the gym than we are in the gym.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's just sorting those things out. And I am happy to repeat them and unpack them for people to just do a little bit of, I think, as a yoga
Yes.
teacher, I've had to do my share of unlearning. And it can be a really cool, interesting journey to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. All right. This was great. I love smashing myths, especially ones around women's fitness. And I think it's really important that women consider that a lot of the advice that we've been given, or a lot of the messaging around the way that we should exercise, just like the way that we should eat, has been by and large bullshit. And we look at the statistics of women breaking hips and women and heart disease for lack of cardiovascular training. Something's not working. So we need to adjust our approach. And so I thank you for being here and for sharing your experience with us. This has been really fun and really helpful. So people can find you on your website and Instagram, which I'll link to in the show notes so people can find you easily. And I see the cattails around too, so they make appearances. But you also have a membership called Calm and Strong, which I love the name of. We're going to link to that in the show notes. But why don't you tell me a little bit about that and who is a good fit for that?
Okay, yeah. I landed on the name Calm and Strong because, again, my yoga background and then just my emphasis on these other forms of movement, primarily strength and conditioning, strength and mobility. And so it's just the connection of those two things. Strength training can be a mindful thing as well. And so you can join the membership and get on the inside and take live classes with me and also have access to that on-demand studio of those classes that have that calm element and also a bit of the strength involved as well.
Yeah, I love the title because who doesn't want to be calm and strong, right?
That's literally the all two things we're trying to be.
This is a dream. And so, for any listeners who are yoga teachers, you also have the Chart Yoga Teacher Workbook for yoga teachers who are ready to level up. So, why don't you tell me about that?
Yes, I'm so proud of the teacher workbook, the chart workbook. I have put everything in this workbook of my experience in teaching in yoga studios for the last 12 years. And it dives into my way of sequencing, my style of cueing and voice, and helping teachers level up and just teach their most authentic classes. So it's comprehensive and there's everything I've put it in there and it's so good.
Awesome. Hello. All right. Well, we'll link to all of those resources in the show notes so people can find them easily. So, thanks again for being here, Trisha. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this week's episode of the Fit Bottom Girls podcast. But don't worry, we're dropping new episodes every Thursday. In the meantime, head over to the show notes for all the links from today's episode, or go to fitbottomedgirls.com/podcast to catch up on past episodes. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next week.